The Story Debt of Love in Dreams. Once upon a time, in Sun La Cave in Hunghua, there was a young man named Chu Sin. His parents died early, so his uncle took him home to raise him and educate him. But as much as my uncle loves me, my aunt hates me as much. Seeing that she had to take care of a grandchild who had to spend a lot of money on food and sleep, the woman was very upset. Over time, the aunt no longer respected him, and every time something unsatisfactory happened, she scolded him. One day, his uncle was away and his aunt scolded him at home. Chu Sin argued back a few times. Seeing that, the aunt couldn't stop her anger. "If that's the case, then get out of here, don't show your face here and eat again." Hearing some insulting words, Chu Sin suddenly became angry. He went in, packed up his clothes, books, then quickly left, vowing not to come back to see his aunt again. He found his parents' dilapidated houses that had been abandoned for a long time, spread a tattered mat on the bed and took a nap. When the uncle returned, he knew clearly what had happened, so he came to the house and invited his nephew home. Chu Sin fasted for 2 days but refused. The uncle brought him rice money and deliberately tried to persuade him. "I'll make an appointment with you for 3 days." But 3 days passed and I still didn't see him return, so he brought rice money to support him. I begged for another 3 days, but still didn't come back. The uncle finally got upset, came to the house and said, "If I tell you, if you don't listen then leave your body alone, there's no point in trying to persuade you." Having said that, from then on, ignore Chu Sin and definitely don't care anymore. After the rice and money ran out, Chu Sin lay fast for 2 days. Even though he was hungry, he still refused to confront his cruel aunt. That day, after reciting a few poems, he naturally fell asleep. While daydreaming, I suddenly saw a mandarin in brilliant uniform, followed by several guards, coming to my house. At that time he was sitting reading a book. He thought they were in the wrong house, but when he said his name, he realized they were looking for him. The official opened the golden box and took out an edict to read to him. At first he thought the emperor was summoning him, but when he heard it, he was surprised. The words, "National Mother of Wachun Country," are truly new, never heard of them before. Even the official's voice was vague, not from the capital region. When he learned that strangers came with good intentions to take him to the capital to become his son-in-law, Chu Sin felt at ease. He thought to himself, "Let's just leave it to chance and try it." He then followed in their footsteps. The road is very dark. Just once, they entered a place with beautiful houses and crowded traffic like a town. Past several large city gates. There were strict guards, and in front of them we saw a magnificent castle with the words, "Golden Palace," written on it. The official told him to wait in front of the dragon yard and then entered a place covered with jade curtains. After a while, he gingerly stepped out to urge him to come in and perform the ceremony. Chu Sin had only had time to bow his head twice when there was a voice inside telling him to excuse him, and telling him to lead him up the steps. He saw that it was an old woman about 60 years old, with a kind face, looking at him with sympathetic eyes. Although he was hungry, he tried his best to stay polite. People invited him to sit on the golden tray to the left of the mother of the country's seat. After the tea and drinks, the banquet was served, with countless delicious dishes spread out all over the mat. After a while, a small palanquin came out of the palace, and on top of it, a young man stepped down to greet Chu Sin. The national mother said in a friendly voice, "Go ahead. The new groom is never shy." Then the two of them became bored with each other. Peripartum has never felt happier and more delicious. In the middle of the meal, the country's mother told him that the emperor was her husband and that his father had promised to marry him quickly. "Now I invite you here to fulfill that promise." Although he did not know when the two sides had known each other, nor did he know what Princess Mong Trang looked like, but he also respectfully nodded. After eating, the mother-in-law turned back and told him, "Please go back. Wait 3 days and someone will come pick you up again." Immediately after that, he left the palace, accompanied by flags, drums, flutes, to the outside of the palace. Suddenly there was a cold wind blowing on his face. Chu Sin suddenly woke up and found himself still lying on the old tattered mat, but his mouth was still full of alcohol and his stomach was still full. Thinking about it again and again, he didn't understand anything. 3 days later, he fell asleep again as before. This time, when he arrived at the Hoang Kim Palace, he saw hanging lights and flowers, extremely brilliant. The newborn is led into a room and changes out of old clothes to wear newly sewn clothes. After a while, a group of palace maids brought the princess out to meet the groom. He was just anxiously waiting for that minute. And he was extremely happy when he peeked and saw that his wife's appearance was hard for anyone to match. The two sides came together to hold the ceremony and poured wine for each other to drink amid the sounds of elegant flute music and everyone's joyful greetings. After that, obeying the mother's command, the two of them took each other into the western room. That night, Chu was extremely happy, and even though he glimpsed strange stripes on his wife's belly and back, he still didn't care. The next morning, after eating, the two of them went to visit the mother country. She told him, "This country is Watan country. In the past, the emperor passed away, leaving us with a large population and a lot of work. The crown prince is still young and I am already old, so I can't take care of him. Luckily, the princess has been helping me ever since. When you get married, you have to follow your husband, but if the princess leaves, no one will help you. So, my son-in-law should express my feelings, leave his wife here, and every 3 days, Su Yen Hua Su will come pick her up." Chu Sin could only obey. After chatting for a while, Chu gave birth and left. The princess saw her husband off to the palace with a sad look on her face. The crown prince joked, "The couple who just got married yesterday, miss each other that much today?" Everyone laughed, making his ears turn red. Then Chu Sin woke up again after a day and night of sleep. The smell of wine and the princess's scent still lingered. This time, he no longer considered it a strange thing. He turned to his practice book again. Stomach still doesn't feel hungry. From then on, every 3 days, Chu Sin dreamed of going to Watan to meet the princess and to have a feast. After the dream ended, he lived alone and in need in a dilapidated house. Even though he didn't eat or drink anything outside of his dream, his face was still rosy and lush. Life continued like that for more than a year. The villagers thought he had the magic of seclusion. When asked, he just laughed without answering. At this time, Princess Zhou's wife gave birth to a son. The mother of the country ordered the mandarins' wives to come and breastfeed the baby. The boy grew up quickly. The day he turned 1-year-old came. He came earlier than usual. When we arrived, we saw the royal court crowded with courtiers, mandarins, big and small, and elders dressed brightly, greeting people enthusiastically. They brought so much money and gifts to celebrate his son that they filled the whole house. In return, the mother of the country ordered a banquet for them. Having to personally go out and pour wine to invite people is quite difficult. One day, as usual, he went to see his mother-in-law. He was surprised to see her face looking unusually sad and frightened. When asked, the mother-in-law wiped away her tears and replied, "For a long time, I had the intention of hiding my son-in-law. But now the time has come when it can no longer be hidden. For 2 months now, every day there have been emergency reports at the border. Evil enemies have invaded the land, plundering and destroying our people countless times. Our troops fought and suffered countless deaths and injuries. Today, beware that the enemy has come close to the capital. So we plan to move to another place tomorrow." Chu Sin was about to ask more about the war situation when he saw the Minister of Infantry asking for an audience. "Your Majesty, the enemy army is getting stronger and more numerous every day. According to the numbers I know, 1/3 of our army and people have sacrificed. If His Majesty tried to stay, there would be no people left to establish a country. So please hurry to the inner city tonight." Hearing that, the mother of the country was scared and immediately ordered her to rush to all directions, ordering the pig to depart on time. Then she reminded Chu Sin, "It's a big national matter, you can't let your son-in-law follow you, and you can't give him many instructions. Just remind the royal son-in-law that I ordered Su Yun Hua Su to bring the princess's money to send for the royal son-in-law to use. The royal son-in-law will try to study well, and one day we will meet again. Not only the princess, but also the child, it is not convenient to follow her son-in-law. Let's break up for a while. In about 26 months, father and son will be together again. Let's go meet my wife for a bit so we can leave." Chu Sin entered the room with tears streaming down his face. The princess was preparing her luggage at that time. She told her husband, "In life, separation is normal. As long as you try hard, we will meet each other soon. I was afraid that you would be sad, so I asked my maid, Dong Mian, to be my companion until the day we meet again. I gave him a jade stone made from the sweet substance of precious flowers. Wearing it in the hot season will keep it cool and warm in the cold season. He always wears it with him as if he had me." Chu Sin quickly told his wife, "Can you follow me? Or if not, then let me come with you." The princess replied, "Number. Currently, he is still working on his career. And I must help my mother preserve the fortunes and lives of all people. The two sides are not complete and cannot follow each other. Don't be sad anymore, happiness will last a long time." After speaking, he took off his shirt and walked out. Chu Sin stopped and asked, "Where and when will we meet on Star Day? Can you tell me in advance?" The princess took the pearl, put it in his pocket and said, "It says everything clearly." When Chu Sin suddenly woke up, he saw that the scene of anxiety and separation just now had disappeared. As soon as he lit the lamp, he saw a package of 10 ounces of gold in the middle of the road. He picked up his pocket, and there was a pearl as white as ivory, with blue veins, as long as a penholder, with a poem engraved on it, When will 10,000 elite soldiers, the army of war drums, be lurking outside the border? To the west of the lake, sail the boat, and Hua Quang goes straight to the east. Waiting for the newspaper to offer merit, Nan Song will propose the corresponding words later. Please don't forget and feel sad. We'll see each other again after 15 years. He read it 2 or 3 times and still didn't understand the meaning. Then he tried to think about the meeting, but could not come up with any clues. His mind was confused. He told his stomach, "In time it will be clear." It's hard to think about it. That day, before dawn, I heard someone crying. He quickly ran to a neighbor's house to ask for news. They said that his aunt had died of a cold and was about to be buried. Hearing that, Chu Sin decided to return to his uncle's house. When the uncle saw his nephew returning home carrying his books, he couldn't hold back his anger and said, "For 2 years now you haven't paid any attention to me. Why don't you just go away? Why come back?" He quickly found a way to lie. "Yesterday I dreamed that my father came home and told me that you were very poor and about to change your marriage. So there is some gold buried in the floor of the house that I dug up and brought back to help you. That's why now that I heard the news of the funeral, I just came back." Having said that, he placed all 10 taels of gold on the table. Seeing that, he changed his anger to joy. From then on, he felt secure in staying at his uncle's house to study. He did not dream like before and did not whisper to anyone about the strange thing that happened. In that department, Chu gave birth to Bean Fragrant Tribute. He offered his wife several places, but he absolutely refused. One day, his uncle who was going to trade brought home an 18-year-old girl who had lost her way. Hearing the girl say her name was Dong Nyan, Chu Sin suddenly remembered what his wife had told him before parting, so he agreed to follow his uncle's advice and take her as his concubine. More than a year later, Dong Nyan gave birth to a son. The older the baby got, the more Chu Sin saw it was similar to his child in Watan, born to him by the princess. He counted on his fingers and it was 26 months, just as the motherland had said. At this time, Zhou's real life became more glorious and prosperous than before. He was a high-ranking mandarin in the court and was respected by everyone. One year, there was an enemy in Tuyan Quang. The king appointed him a general to bring 20,000 troops to defeat the enemy. The army was about to reach the camp when it encountered a ravine blocking the way. Asking the people nearby, they said it was Ho Tui Stream. In front was Hua Deep Quang. Go around to the west or east for a day and you would reach the enemy camp. Hearing those names mentioned, he suddenly remembered the words engraved on the pearl. He just opened the pearl and read the poem again, and it was clear that those were discreet words giving him a trick to defeat the enemy. He followed that plan and attacked on both sides. As expected, the enemy lost heavily, killed and captured most of them. After winning the battle, he sailed around Hua Quang. The ferryman told him that 15 years ago, there was a flock of several thousand butterflies flying somewhere in the middle of the night, filling the sky, so it was called Hua Deep. 1. Chu Sin understood, both strange and happy, so he quickly stopped the boat to rest. That night he dreamed again that Su Yanhua porcelain came to pick him up. He goes now. When he arrived, he realized that the scenery was much more beautiful than before. The castle was large and densely populated. As soon as we arrived at the palace gate, the mother of the country came out to greet us warmly. It must be difficult for your son-in-law to defeat the enemy. Alas, now the beard and mustache have grown longer and are no longer as young as before. The days are so quick. Then he met the princess again in the west room, and the two had a very passionate conversation. The next day, until afternoon, Chu Xin still did not want to go home. The mother-in-law entered the room and urged him to try to finish his affairs, and said, "I am very old now. I decided that in 10 days, I will divide the country in half for the crown prince, half for the princess. So, my son-in-law, remember to come back here to see if we can get a new country. Nowadays, the people are peaceful, but the husband-in-law should also pay attention to prevent enemy troops from breaking in and harassing this Chinese city." Chu Xin only had time to sleep for a few hours in his dream when someone woke him up. The maids surrounding him told him that he had slept 1 night and 1 day. He hastily said to reassure them, "The army has been tired for a long time, so he slept to make up for it," but he didn't expect to bother the generals. Then, he planned to take precautions for the country of Watan. He thought that only birds were enemies of butterflies, so he immediately bought 30 fields around Hua Kuang, letting the farmers work for free with each task being to chase birds for himself. Then he brought his army back. The king praised his merits and rewarded him handsomely. But the king was surprised to see that and immediately submitted his resignation. The king could not force him, so he had to let him satisfy his will. Having been relieved of his duties, one day he said goodbye to his uncle and took his wife and children to visit the Hua Deep Kuang area. Almost there, all 3 people suddenly turned into 3 white butterflies flying into the sky. Crossing the lake, Su Yanhua envoy and a whole army of butterflies came out to welcome them, too. Science in Lu Tri Kai Bai. There is a story about Princess Lin Hua that is similar to our story. A Confucian scholar, Do Huck, sleeping during the day, dreamed that a stranger came to his bedside and said, "I am a servant of the general who lives nearby, here. The general invites you to visit." Do followed, arriving at a place where houses were close together and castles were stacked. After walking around for a long time, I saw palace servants and female officials waiting. Seeing guests arriving, a noble person came out to welcome them very respectfully. Then followed the 2 female officials into several doors. Do saw the words, Kei Fu, written on it. A king sitting on the temple came down to welcome him and ordered a banquet to be prepared. During the banquet, there was a melodious song. The king chatted for a while, then suddenly said, "I have a couplet, I would like to ask the mandarins to give it to me. The talented person goes to Kei Fu. The talented person goes to Kei Fu." While everyone was thinking, Do responded, "The gentleman loves lotus flowers." The king was very happy and said, "That's strange. Lin Hua is the princess's name, otherwise, if you have the right fate, how can you be so compatible?" Then he called the princess out to greet him. Seeing that the princess was about 16 or 17, beautiful and hard to match, the Do family became ecstatic, sat still, and forgot to answer. The king's question was that he wanted to marry the princess to him. When he left, hearing what the mandarin who was accompanying him to say goodbye said, Do was bewildered, and suddenly woke up. Another day, Do Huck was lying in bed with his friend, when he suddenly woke up. When he saw the internal mandarin calling him, He arrived at the palace and heard the king talk about marrying the princess, so he immediately accepted. The flower banquet was laid out, the two parties performed the ceremony and then returned to the inn. When they entered the flower room, Do took out his belt, measuring his wife's arms and legs. The princess said, "What are you doing that makes you so crazy?" Answer: Because you often dream, you should remember carefully so that if it is indeed a dream, you will remember it for a long time. Suddenly, a palace maid ran in screaming. There was a monster entering the palace door. Do was frightened and went to see the king. The king held his hand and cried, saying, "What now? The country is in danger." Then he showed Do a copy of the minister's report, which said, "There was a 1,000-foot-long python outside the palace, once devouring tens of thousands of people's lives. Wherever it went, the bamboo castle fell. Since ancient times, there has never been a disaster as great as this. Please, Your Majesty, please leave the royal family immediately." After reading it, Do's face turned pale. Immediately a palace maid ran to say, "The monster has come." The whole palace cried like crazy. The king also cried and said, "This young lady is a burden to you." Do felt embarrassed and returned home to see his wife and servants holding their heads and crying. The wife said to her husband, "Where are you taking me?" Answer: "My family is poor and only has 3 tents. Can you live in it? If it's so urgent, why choose to do it?" Do brought his wife home. The wife thought this place was safe and asked her husband to immediately build a house for her father and the whole country to move there. Do hesitated, his wife cried bitterly. At this point, Do woke up. Hearing the sound of bees buzzing on the pillow, Do told his friend about the dream. "You advise him to make a beehive. As soon as I finished working, I saw bees flying continuously. After investigating, I found out that the bees belonged to the old neighbor." People told the story of the Do family to the old neighbor. The old man looked at his beehive and saw that it was deserted, and there was a snake about a meter long lying in there, so he caught it and killed it. Nagi people also tell a story, also with similar content. Once upon a time, there was a mandarin who went to town in an outside district. One day, the mandarin and his guests had a party and drank wine under a large eucalyptus tree. Drunk with wine, the mandarin slept under that tree. "Suddenly I had a dream that a great man from Dai Ho country invited him to court to meet him and eventually marry a princess. He stayed there to work as a military general and then a literary general, living a glorious life for 10 years. When I woke up, I found myself still lying at the base of the tree. Looking into the hollow of the tree, I saw an ant nest, in which there was a queen ant, surrounded by small ants waiting and serving, just like in the royal court that I had experienced in my dream." 3. The story just told is probably influenced by the Chinese story of the Thai beast Nam Kha. Once upon a time, there was Thuan Vu Phan, a gallant playboy, fond of drinking, living in Quang Lang district. Near the house there is a very large tree, its luxuriant shade covers several acres. On his birthday, Thuan invited guests there to drink wine. Drunk, Thuan was helped home by a guest. Lying alone, he dreamed that 2 messengers dressed in purple came to tell him that the king of Hoenn was summoning him. He got in the car, drove into the hollow of a tree and suddenly came to a place with a citadel, houses, palanquins, and crowded people. Arriving at the citadel gate, you see the words, "Dai Ho" and "Quoc." Stay at a restaurant where the general will treat you very well. The right general said that the king wanted to choose a son-in-law. When meeting the king, it was like that. Here he met two drinking friends, Chu Bien and Dean Tu Hua. The princess was very beautiful and pleased him. What followed was a life of pleasure. Not long after, the king appointed him the governor of Nam Kha district. I asked permission for the two of you to go together. Arriving there, he and his two friends took charge of the military for several decades, had good political records, were loved by the people, respected by the king, and were given real estates and titles. His wife gave birth to 5 sons and 2 daughters. The son became a mandarin, and the daughter was married to the king's family, with glory second to none. Then an army from the Dan La country came to rob them, and the king sent them to fight. He ordered Chu Bien to take 30,000 troops. But Bien despised the enemy, lost and died. Then, the princess died, and he resigned and returned to the court. From then on, let go of your majesty and happiness. There were detractors, so the king ordered the guards to be withdrawn and banned from traveling. He became even more resentful. The king advised him to return to his hometown, but he did not want to return. The king said he was not from here. He suddenly understood and accepted. 2 purple-shirted messengers sent him away. Arriving at home, getting out of the car, I suddenly woke up and saw that I was still lying down and the guest was still there. Then he told them, everyone led each other to the hollow of the tree. They made a wide opening and then crawled in. The further they went in, the wider they became. Inside there was an ant's nest with several compartments. There were about 10 big ones. The others did not dare to come close, knowing that they were the king and mandarin of Hoan. In the innermost part, there is a hole through the south branch. There is also an ant nest here. Know that this is Nam Kha district. I followed other branches again, knowing that was where I often hunted, or where I buried my wife. He remembered the war with the Dan La country, so he tried to look around, and it turned out that it was another ant nest in a piano. Remembering his 2 drinking companions, Chu Bien and Dean Tu Hua, he sent someone to look for him, only to find Chu Bien dead, and the other lying on a hospital bed. 4. Nagi people also have a story, although different in content but with the same structure. A person takes a nap and dreams of seeing a politely dressed guest inviting him out. That person followed him to the house and saw that the house was made of dirt but close together like a street, beautifully decorated. He saw all the teachers, servants, wives and children in harmony, and the village was crowded. After sitting for a while, a group of elegantly dressed people came out and suggested, "We have lived in this place for 4 years, and now your house suddenly encroaches on our land for no reason, so please move away." Different 4. That person woke up and didn't understand anything. Later found a famous fortune teller. The teacher cast a hexagram, saying the house was unsettled, and had to dig up the house's foundation to get rid of it. That person ordered digging and all 3 rooms were crowded with winged ants. If it cannot be completely eliminated, that person will have to move his house to another place. Later, he met a magician who had the art of repelling ants. This person was shown a magic trick by the magician. On the first day of Tet, put an empty roasting pot on the stove, hold his hands and mouth and recite, "The more ants are, the more ants are, The more ants are. The more ants are. Baby ants. Go up the mountains, find a way to get there. That person did exactly that. All the winged ants on the floor flew up to the mountain. 5. 1. This image of the story probably comes from real migrations of butterflies that probably happened in Vietnam in the past. Migration of large flocks of butterflies is not a rare occurrence in the world. According to statistics by U.Y. Leam, William, British, in 1930 the world had 214 species of butterflies migrating 1237 times. According to him, in 1935, a flock of bandicoots flew from Mexico to Canada and to Alaska, a distance of 4,000 kilometers. In China, there have been 5 incidents of butterfly migration between Yunnan and Guangxi provinces. The Shanghai newspaper Tan Van wrote, "At noon on May 2, 1953, the sky was cloudy. There was a flock of tens of millions of white butterflies flying from the east to Ban Chao, a town east of Kunming, Yunnan. 20 kilometers. The butterflies landed and rested for about 2 hours all over the forests, fields and on the walls of houses, then flew back to the west." Chinese leopard flower. 2. According to the story of Hua Quoc Ky Duyen in Tan Tong Di Thao and Hua National Flag, Vietnamese translation by Nguyen Si Su, 1914. This is one of the unique visual stories of Vietnamese fairy tales, but there is probably influence from foreign fairy tales. 3. According to the Hong Duong Village Affidavit. 4. According to Tai Bin Quang Ky and Duong Nhan novels. 5. According to the Dien Le Village Affidavit. Thank you for joining us for today's fairy tale. We hope these stories bring joy and meaning to your day. If you love our channel, please hit the subscribe button so you won't miss any exciting tales. Wishing you a good night and sweet dreams. See you in the next story.